Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Navigating Elder Care Planning Maze webinar today. And before we get started, I need to read you a quick disclosure. The opinions voiced are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific legal advice or recommendations for any individual. So now that we've got that piece of it out of the way, guys, we can get to the good stuff. So my guests today are Leanne Klarner, and Leanne is the administrator for Meadowthorpe Assisted Living Center in Lexington, and Ben Byers of Ben Byers Law in Owensboro. And I know both these folks well and are excited to have them with me. And so, guys, thank you so much again for being here. And I know that our folks are going to pick up some good information here. So,
thanks for having us.
Thank you. So let's, when people hear the term elder care, a lot of things go through their mind. So I don't believe there is a uniform definition of elder care, but when you guys hear that term, what do y'all think of?
Sure, I think from our perspectives are probably different, of course, as they should be, but from a legal perspective, really what elder care means for us is we focus on estate planning, asset protection, and then obtaining government benefits for those who need them so they don't have to spend all of their money on the long-term care.
For me, it's probably more of helping that actual family navigate the healthcare system and providing that care and getting the right placement, whether that's aging in place to assisted living to nursing home. So helping after that financial and legal counsel, how do we best take care of your loved one?
So our aim today is really come at it from a two-pronged angle, one from a legal standpoint and one from a care provider standpoint. So Ben, if we're talking about it from a legal standpoint, what are the documents that everyone needs regardless of what their situation might be?
Yeah, that's a good question, Randy. No matter where you're at in life, but particularly as you age, you for sure need a power of attorney. You need a financial one and a medical one. You need a living will, and then you need either a will or a trust. You need something there at the end that is going to allow you to decide what happens with your money and your assets after you pass away. Because if you do nothing, nobody wants the government to decide what happens with it. The powers of attorney are extremely important because they allow whoever you appoint as your agent to act on your behalf when you cannot. If you don't have somebody appointed as an agent for you, what will happen is if you get into a situation where you can't act, say you're incapacitated for some reason, you'll have to go to guardianship court. You'll have to get appointed as a guardian with the judge. And then every little thing that you do for that person, you will have to be notifying the judge, letting them know what they're doing. And it's a huge hassle. It's a huge hassle that can be pretty easily avoided with some fairly simple documents. So I would recommend you for sure need powers of attorney. If you do nothing else, that needs to be done.
And generally those are going to be prepared by an attorney, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that they are correct and that they cover everything that needs to be covered. It's especially true in care for senior citizens because you're going to need some things that you're allowed to do that are specifically outlined in there in case you need some certain types of planning if you go into a nursing home or if a loved one goes into a nursing home. And just a general blanket power of attorney, sometimes the places won't accept those. They don't feel like they're good enough, or for whatever reason, you just want one that's airtight and really well done.
We run into cases where folks say, well, I've got a paragraph in my durable power of attorney that says my spouse is the person responsible for my healthcare decisions. And I know my position has always been, we want a separate document for what you just said to really lock that down and make sure there are no.
I mean, now you may get lucky and that may work with some providers, but you may not. They may not take that. They may think it's too broad, that it doesn't outline specific powers. And we like to break them up into two documents because a lot of people, they want one person as their financial representative, one person as their medical representative. I know I had some clients a while back who had a nurse that was a son, and they wanted him to be the medical POA. And they had someone else that worked in the financial sector, and they wanted them to be the financial POA. you also don't necessarily want banks seeing your medical stuff and your medical stuff seeing your financial stuff. So it's just much simpler to keep those separated, and it's much clearer for the people who need to rely on them. And I briefly talked about a living will, and that's super important too. I mean, that kind of takes the pressure off of your loved ones in end of life situations, whether or not to be provided extreme measures or not extreme measures. And if you make that decision in advance, that's less of a burden that you're going to put on your family when they're trying to decide what they need to do.
So Leanne, Vince talked about all these documents, and I know just from my limited knowledge and from talking to you, there's basically 3 levels of care that when we talk about elder care that you're going to get into. Would you discuss those real quick and just kind of give some examples of what those would look like?
Right. As everyone likes to really, there's 3 levels. Aging in place is a term you hear often, and that's where maybe your parents or your loved one still can stay home, but yet they need some level of care. So whether that's a family caregiver, a lot of times that can be a spouse that's living with the person, or private caregivers can come in. And even now in the industry, there's a lot of non-medical home care companies. And those folks can all come in and help for someone with their activities of daily living, which that can be from bathing, showering, daily hygiene, dressing, bathroom assistance, and all those things. Because what tends to happen is people need help with bathing because of the fear of falling or medication reminders. So folks can start there, maybe aging in place at home, and start with that private caregiver, family, spouse, or a non-medical home company. Then if things get...
Let me interject something real quick right there, Leanne. According to all the insurance providers who provide benefits, among their claimants, 86% start with the aging in place or start at home.
Yes.
And 87% of those are by the caregivers who are the spouses and the children. We're not under an alert or anything. That's the weekly Madisonville siren to make sure that it's working. So if you hear that, we're okay. So anyway, so most of that's going to fall on family, which, I'm experiencing that right now. You're experiencing that right now. And so it's just something that we all live with. But that is folks that say, that's not where we will be.
Right. A lot of
the
times
odds are good you will be.
Right. A lot of times that's where it all starts. And sometimes it can carry and be there that entire time. And then when it becomes when that loved one is maybe not safe at home in that environment, or it requires additional care, maybe it's 24/7 care to keep them at home, which that is very costly. Some families can do that, but others then can start to look at like assisted living and memory care. So that's where someone can actually move into a congregate community where they can have some independence of having their own apartment and that type, but yet right outside the door, you have caregivers that are available again to help them with all those activities of daily living, provide the meals, the laundry, the housekeeping, medical transportation, all the things that we take for granted for every day. That is where those offering in those communities can help with their loved ones as well. And there's peace of mind for that family member that's taking care of their loved one, because they know they're safe. They have caregivers in place to take care of all their needs. And that's the second kind of area. And then there's memory care for those that maybe need advanced care for Alzheimer's if it becomes that point, and maybe they have wandering or behavioral issues that we have to address. And then finally,
do memory care facilities often differ than just normal assisted living?
Yes, very much so. In the state of Kentucky, for assisted living, in the state of Kentucky, you can have that assisted living. We do that here. We offer both assisted living and memory care. In memory care, it's a locked unit as far as that's defined by in Kentucky. That means there's locks. So if somebody goes up to the door and pushes the door, an alarm will go off for 30 seconds prior to the door opening. So that gives time for the caregiver to go to that door and get the resident patient back into a safe environment. So it makes it, those that are mainly wanderers, as they call us, wanderers that want to have that tendency, want to get out. That's when you have memory care units and that piece to help. And the third area is really skilled nursing. And Ben mentioned this in some planning that he can do and help folks as well. And that's when somebody has probably now non-ambulatory, they're more bedridden and not able to ambulate very well and need nursing care 24 hours a day. And that's when someone would have to go into the nursing home. Now, there are times when someone can have an event such as a fall, maybe they've broken a hip or something, and then they can go into a nursing home for a short-term stay for rehab. And then Medicare will pay for that as long as it's approved for medical necessity up to, I believe, 90 to 100 days. And insurance really dictates that of how long they can stay. Then if they've rehabbed long enough, then they can come back and either go back home or go to assisted living. And that's where during this whole transition, it's something that you have to navigate the system all along as things change and the level of conditions change on your loved one. So you can maybe you've gone home until that break of the hip, and then from the hip breaking, they feel like mom's not safe to go back home. So then that's when they could transition to assisted living. So
just because you start in one doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're going to stay, and you can go move up or down the scale.
that is correct. Very much. Yes.
So Ben, how often do people contact you and say, hey, I want to do my planning, so in the event that I have to go to a skilled facility or have to have some kind of long-term care, I want to be proactive in that, because statistics prove that 70% of us will require some kind of long-term care at some point in our life. Now, the funny thing is that 99% of us think we're going to be in the 30%, not the 70%. So
that's
like,
true on both.
How do we work for that? How do we adjust for those?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, basically, if you live long enough, you'll probably wind up in a nursing home at some point. It just depends on how that goes. But nobody wants to think that's going to be them, but you got to plan just in case it is you. Oftentimes I'll get people that are around, early 60s, mid 60s, 70s come in. They just want a will done. They don't really understand, what could potentially happen. And really the greatest threat to a senior's wealth is a nursing home. That's really about the only thing that's going to hit them with any level of certainty where they could go broke paying for it. So we try to plan for while they're alive and upon their death. So we cover both things. So essentially the proactive planning is what we do generally when we think somebody has about 5 years before they would have to go into a nursing facility. If we think we've got that kind of time, we can do proactive planning for them. And essentially what we can do is we can protect every single thing that they want to protect: their home, if they have accounts, whatever they have, CDs, any kind of assets they have. It can be not a huge amount, it could be a huge amount. We can protect all of that from being seen by Medicaid after 5 years once they have had to go into a nursing home. So if you do that proactive planning, you are really giving yourself options of what you want to do. I mean, you can always, if you've protected that money early, you can use a little bit of that to boost your nursing home, which one you want to go into, whatever you need to do. But it gives you options, and then it assures you that you will not go broke paying for a nursing home should that happen, that you have to go in there or a spouse has to go in there.
My understanding also is, from a Medicaid planning standpoint, Medicaid does not pay for assisted living. Is that correct, Leanne?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
So
Assisted living in memory care is private pay or covered by long-term care insurance, or if someone has veterans aid and attendant benefit, if they qualify that as a veteran.
A lot of people think, assisted living will be covered by Medicaid or Medicare, and that's not the case.
Right. Yeah, not the case.
And Ben, you mentioned a while ago, or Leanne, one of you, talking about long-term care insurance. Statistically right now, only 5% of long-term care insurance applications and policies are traditional long-term care insurance, where you pay a premium, and then if you ever have the need, you go into the facility and then you have to apply for reimbursement, and they're going to pay back. 95% are different products, different hybrid products that are really very popular on the market now. So that's something we can talk about at some point in time also.
Those are a great bridge with the proactive planning if you do both in conjunction, because if something happened and you couldn't make it 5 years, if you have one of those policies that you're talking about, you can really pay up through that 5-year mark and then get on Medicaid. So essentially you're alleviating almost all of your risk if you do both things.
So Leanne, we talked about moving up or down the scale as far as the quality, or not necessarily the quality, but the type of care that you need. So what are some signs that it's time to make a change, or that you need to upgrade your level of care?
Well, I think a lot of it starts with watching and observing your loved one. You know, how is mom or dad doing at home by themselves? Or are they able to prepare meals? Are they eating right? Are they able to get their medications correct? And just doing those assessments and trying to figure out, are they able to pay their bills timely, or can they manage that? And so when you start to see some of those things, even like the fear of taking a shower or a bath and that fear of falling, those are when it's time to start asking and working with your loved one and just doing an assessment and trying to figure out, is it time to provide that extra set of hands, as I like to say, if they're going to age in place. And maybe it's just a few things that you start with to help a loved one. And it all kind of depends on each person's family circumstance. If family is close by, they tend to pitch in and help, but then there's others that may live out of state. So then it maybe becomes more time for mom to move and be in a safe environment like an assisted living. So each case is different. And then I think during that whole time, you just have to work with someone to help you navigate the place and where's the right setting for your loved one during that time. That's what we do a lot every day here. And what I've done previously is just helping somebody navigate that whole system and where's the right setting. So that's just the key is asking and looking and researching and getting advice from those that have the experience for each entity or each place of that settings.
So how often, Leanne, do you see, or Ben, either one of you, a jump straight from aging in place straight to a skilled facility, and just where the jump is over the assisted living?
You can have that just because if someone's able maybe to keep them at home until that point in time. And what I can tell you that we're seeing here in this industry in assisted living and memory care, and especially with the pandemic, anybody that could stay at home and just manage home, a lot of times that has been what's happening. Now more and more people are kind of coming back and looking at assisted living and seeing that piece because they're wanting, to keep their loved ones safe. But that does happen. I just talked to a lady this morning. She called about her husband and he was at home, and more than likely he's already declined so much that he would have to go to skilled nursing and not to assisted living.
You see that in my experience, you see that a lot.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I was going to say, I agree with that. In my experience, you see it a lot. A lot of times it can happen from something that's not necessarily expected, like a fall or a stroke. They're totally fine and taking care of themselves. And then instantly, essentially, they no longer can at all.
Right.
You see a progression with dementia and Alzheimer's as well. But I mean, you can flip a switch with a fall or a stroke, and you gotta start taking care of them in a nursing home then.
And even the fall, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say the fall, that maybe they're doing well at home, but then that fall is really another reason. We say that there's always an event that usually drives someone to assisted living right now in the circumstances we're in.
My own personal story is my father woke up, had a stroke, and ended up spending the last 7.5 years of his life in a nursing facility.
Right.
And so, I mean, so it's kind of and it does make a difference if you've got family that can be involved and participate. And and help out in those ways also. Even in the nursing facility, that always is.
Mhm.
So Ben, somebody comes to you and says, you know, I've accumulated some wealth, but I want to protect it as much as possible. We're going to insure part of that risk. What are
Mhm.
some of the other tools and techniques that we can use to be able to protect some of these assets and some of the income stream that we have?
Sure. So we have our practice is really divided up into two planning situations. You have proactive planning, which is while you're still at least moderately healthy, and then you have crisis planning while you're either in the nursing home, you're in the hospital, and they know they're going to discharge your loved one to a nursing home. And the strategies we use vary depending on each different circumstance. For proactive planning, a lot of that is trust work. We would put a lot of those assets into certain types of trust to make sure that those passed muster for Medicaid, where if they are in those particular types of trust and it's set up a particular type of way, you can still essentially not technically have ownership of most of your assets, but you are the one who is appointing the person who is handling that stuff. So essentially, if you have control over your child, or you know they're going to do what you want them to do, you're still maintaining some level of control over that, and we can protect all of that. And a crisis case it depends on if you're married or if you're single on what we can do, and even if you have an issue, like if you have a child who is on Social Security disability, that's typically not a great thing in a family. You don't want that to happen, but it's almost sort of a golden ticket situation. And when you do Medicaid planning, because of things we can do as far as gifting to them and then putting it into a special needs trust for the loved one, just a big variety of things you can do to make sure that you save money for people, but you got to make sure that you do it right. It's not something that you can do on your own. I mean, you can, but you really run the risk of penalizing the person you're trying to help if you do it incorrectly. And it's very, very easy to do it wrong. So you got to make sure that if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you have somebody helping you who does know what they're doing. So, in any situation, we're going to save people far more money than if they would have had to go and private pay in a nursing home. Far more money.
So what are some of the tools and the techniques that we use? I know you mentioned some different
Sure,
types
yeah.
of trusts.
So so some trust for the proactive planning. For the crisis planning, if you're married, there's things called exempt assets that Medicaid doesn't even count. So you can have one vehicle of any value as long as it can transport that person. So let's say somebody has, just for example, they have $200,000 in assets. When you go into a nursing home, they're going to do a resource assessment on the husband and wife. They're going to take half of that money and they're going to give it to the spouse that's not in the nursing home. Say you can keep that up to a certain amount. It's like 123,000 or something like that. The other half, they're going to say, if you don't have any help, they're going to say, spend this down to $2,000 and then you can get on Medicaid. Well, that's not what you want to do. Obviously, you don't want to just pay the nursing home $6,000 to $10,000 a month until all that money is gone. You want to protect that for the spouse who is not in the nursing home. So there's a few things you can do. You can make improvements to the home. You can prepay your burial and your funeral expenses. You can also turn that asset, so you can turn that $100,000 that they're saying you need to spend down. You can turn that into an income stream for the spouse who's at home, because Medicaid doesn't care how much that spouse at home makes. So what you can do is you can purchase a Medicaid compliant annuity with that $100,000, and then it'll pay that money back to the spouse that's at home over a period of time. So it essentially turns that money from an asset into income, which Medicaid doesn't care about then, and that ends up saving all of that money for the spouse that's at home. Whereas if you do nothing, nursing homes will be happy to take your check. They'll, you know what I mean? They'll take it until the bank says it's, overdrawn. Nothing against them. I know it's a business, but it doesn't have to be that way.
What about the look back period? I don't know, have we addressed a little bit on that? I hear that all the time.
Yeah, so that is kind of what I talked about with the trust work for the proactive planning. Anytime you give a gift for less than fair market value, except in a very limited circumstance, Medicaid looks at that as a gift. And if it's within 5-year period, Medicaid is going to penalize you. What they do is they take the amount of that gift that you gave for less than fair market value, and they divide it by their penalty period, which is like $199 a day. So if you give a gift of, let's say you give $50,000 to somebody, and you divide that by $199, that's about 251 days before Medicaid would say, okay, you can get on Medicaid. So you would have to private pay for that period of time. So if you give that money away and then that person goes and spends it, or if it goes and the person you gave it to had planned on holding it for you just in case, but say they got sued and they lost it, whatever, they had a gambling problem, who knows? You're going to be in a pretty big bind, because Medicaid is going to say you can't get on there for 251 days, and then that money is no longer there. So when we put the assets into a trust, there's specific instructions on what can and can't be done. And you're going to have a trustee that you name that controls what can be done with that money. It also nobody can come after that money, not the trustee's creditors, not your creditors. Nobody can come after that. But you do still need to make it 5 years if you can. Because once you make it 5 years, Medicaid no longer looks at it whatsoever. So if you do nothing, they're always going to see those assets. If you do the proactive planning, once you make it 5 years, you could have $20 million in that trust, and Medicaid won't care. You'll still get on Medicaid. And one thing that I wanted to address while we're doing is I get some people wondering sometimes if the level of care that their loved one is going to receive is going to be different if they are on Medicaid versus whether they're private paying. And Leanne can speak to this, but I always say no. I mean, the nurse there doesn't know who's paying that bill. I mean, they don't care. The doctor doesn't care who's paying that bill. You're essentially getting the same kind of care. You're just trying to protect what you spend a lifetime earning, either to increase your care or to leave a legacy to your kids or whoever you want to leave it to.
Leanne, and we've talked about providing care and the associated planning opportunities. How do you go about determining and assessing a loved one's needs during their time requiring long-term care assistance?
Well, I think it's that assessment. You know, there's people out there, patient care navigators, there's elder care coordinators, there's geriatric case managers. And if you can go to those folks that will help you understand and learn in that part. I think a big job of what we do here is education to families, because sometimes they don't have the answers and they're really not knowing what to do. We work with families every day about how do we handle those things. And we've been recently working with a family for memory care, and she really didn't know about geriatric psych as a benefit when you have an Alzheimer's patient that actually is having major behavioral outbursts and aggressiveness. Well, how are you going to get that under control? And so the education and the resources that's out there that can help people with that aspect. And the other thing that is just not only like in assisted living, we partner with home health providers so they can provide therapy as well as nursing services here. We also have 2 doctors and a nurse practitioner. So the facilities and the communities partner with other healthcare providers to be that whole package for residents. And that's also out there to help in that post-acute time. And so you just have to find that right person to help you navigate the system and figure out what's right for your loved one financially, as well as for their care needs and what they can do.
Well, guys, we're almost at the bottom of the hour. So I want to personally thank each one of you for participating with me on this. It's been a learning experience for me. And I just thank you guys. Thank you for your knowledge that you have and the care that you provide to your clients and your patients. It's just great because, I mean, we're all about trying to help people. Okay. And there's different tools and there's a lot of ways to go about it. So, and that's one of my goals is I'm more concerned about helping you with the financial planning and your lifelong planning because there's a whole lot more to it than just saying, hey, we're going to invest your money. There's a lot more that we can do to help people develop strategies. Life is a long journey. And so we want to try to help you do that in whatever ways that we can. We're fortunate that we can employ professionals call them professionals like Leanne and Ben to assist our clients And I know that they would, if I say go to one of these guys, I know they're going to be well taken care of. I have no doubt in my mind about it. So we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to put up a slide real quick that has our contact information on it for all three of us. And so I'm going to leave that up for just a couple of minutes here. So if you guys want to make a quick comment real quick, just to wrap up, and we'll get ready to call it a day. Leanne?
Well, thank you, Randy, for inviting me. It was a pleasure. And I would just say, encourage families, have conversations with your family, your parents, your grandparents, whoever it is you're taking care of, and find out what their wishes are. Sometimes it's nice to have those conversations while they're cognitive and they can tell you what they want. So then during that time when maybe they're not as able and you're having to direct that care, you can carry out most of their wishes at that point. And don't feel free, feel free. I would answer anybody's question that had something. I love to help people. I have a passion for seniors, and so feel free to give me a call.
Yeah, I agree with Leanne in that it does alleviate a lot of emotional stress if you talk about these things beforehand. I've seen it a lot, and it would be very helpful to have these conversations. It's been a pleasure meeting with you guys. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see some people in some different sectors that also care about helping the senior population. I've always just thought, look, the seniors, they raised us. It's time for us to help them out, help take care of them. And I see that every day with sons and daughters trying to help their family out, and they need help from us to guide them in the right way. So it's nice to have met with you guys. And if there's anybody out there that ever needs to talk to me, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to speak to you at any time.
Guys, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, folks, for attending the webinar, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks.
Y'all have a good day. Bye.